You know this moment, even if you never talk about it. You're sitting in a meeting, confident enough to speak, and someone smirks and says something sharp, maybe framed as a joke, maybe wrapped in just being honest, and suddenly the room feels smaller. Or you're with friends, relaxed, laughing, until one comment lands sideways and everyone hears it, and you feel exposed. Or worse, it happens in front of strangers, a public laugh at your expense, and your body reacts before your mind does. Your heart speeds up. Your face gets warm. Your thoughts scatter. Part of you wants to explain, to clarify, to prove you're not what they just implied. Another part of you wants to disappear, to sink into the floor, to rewind the last 30 seconds and choose silence instead. In that instant, you're not thinking about power or psychology or strategy. You're thinking about survival. You feel small, watched, judged. And the most painful part isn't even what they said. It's the feeling that everyone else now sees you differently. Shame doesn't hurt because it's true. It hurts because it's public. And here's the part nobody tells you, because it sounds uncomfortable and unfair. You didn't lose because you were wrong. You lost because you reacted. The second you rushed to defend yourself, your body leaning forward, your voice tightening, your words coming too fast, you accept their frame. You signal that what they said has authority over you. You hand them the knife and show them exactly where to cut. Most people replay these moments later in their head, wishing they had said something smarter, colder, more controlled. But the real mistake wasn't the lack of a clever comeback. The mistake was believing that you had to respond at all. Public shaming works because it hijacks your instincts. It pulls you into a role you never chose, the role of the one who needs to explain. And once you're in that role, the damage is already done. If this feels familiar, if you've ever driven home in silence after a moment like that, replaying every word, this isn't because you're weak or socially inept. It's because no one ever taught you what shame really is. Shame is not an insult. It is a test. And until you learn how to face it without flinching, it will keep finding you, again and again, in rooms where you least expect it. To understand what actually protects you in moments of public pressure, we need to borrow a lens most people misunderstand. When people hear the word Machiavellian, they think cruelty, manipulation, or cold ambition. That's not what this is about. Machiavelli was not teaching people how to be evil. He was teaching them how to survive in environments where appearances matter more than intentions and perception outweighs truth. His core insight was simple and uncomfortable. Public life is not a safe space. It never has been. The moment you step into a room with other people, especially a room with status, hierarchy, or attention, you are being measured. Shame in that world is not a moral judgment. It is a tool of control. It is used to lower your position, to test your stability, to see whether you can be pushed, rattled, or exposed. This video is not about giving you clever comebacks or teaching you how to win verbal sparring matches. A sharp line might feel satisfying in the moment, but it does nothing to solve the real problem. The real problem is that shame still gets inside you. The real goal here is not to look strong. It is to stop feeling wounded. Machiavellian psychology is about removing leverage. When someone cannot emotionally move you, they cannot control you. That is where power actually begins. Power begins the moment you stop needing to be understood, approved of, or corrected in public. Machiavelli didn't teach cruelty. He taught survival. He understood that if you rely on other people to confirm your worth, you are always one comment away from collapse. This video will show you how to change your position entirely, not by becoming louder or harsher, but by becoming untouchable. Once you see shame for what it really is, a signal, not a verdict, you stop trying to fight it. You step outside of it. And from that position, the game changes in your favor. Gary, the reason shame keeps beating you has nothing to do with intelligence, confidence, or strength. It beats you because it hijacks your biology before your mind has a chance to intervene. When someone shames you publicly, your brain does not process it as a social inconvenience. It processes it as a threat. Deep inside your head, the amygdala lights up. The same ancient alarm system that once decided whether you lived or died in a tribe. In those conditions, being embarrassed meant being pushed out. Being pushed out meant not eating, not mating, not surviving. Your nervous system still believes that story, so your body reacts instantly. Heart rate jumps, breathing shortens, muscles tense, your mind narrows. This is fight or flight, and shame is one of the fastest triggers there is. That is why your reactions feel automatic, and why you often regret them seconds later. Think about a common situation. A boss makes a sarcastic comment in a meeting. Not loud, not aggressive, just sharp enough for others to notice. Before you even decide what to do, you start explaining. You add details nobody asked for. You justify choices that did not need justification. You speak longer than usual. In your head, you are trying to correct the record. In the room, something else is happening. Your status is slipping. The more you talk, the smaller you look. The problem is not what you are saying. The problem is that you are reacting. In modern social hierarchies, reaction is information. It tells everyone who is watching where the pressure points are. It reveals who is emotionally exposed and who is composed. This is the brutal truth most people never hear. The person who reacts first is almost always the one in the weaker position. Not because they are wrong, but because they are readable. Emotion is honest. Power is controlled. When shame pulls an emotional response out of you, it signals that someone else can move you. And if they can move you, they can manage you. This is why smart, capable people still lose these moments. They assume the battle is about facts, tone, or fairness. It is not. It is about nervous systems. Until you understand that shame is a biological trap, you will keep blaming yourself for falling into it. Once you see it clearly, the self-judgment stops. You realize you are not failing. You are being triggered. And that realization is the first step out of the trap, because you cannot override what you do not recognize. Silence is the simplest move you can make. And that is exactly why it works so well when shame tries to corner you in public. When an insult lands, most people rush to fill the space it creates, because silence feels dangerous, awkward, and exposed. Humans are wired to believe that a pause means rejection or loss of control. So the instinct is to talk, smile, explain, or soften the blow. But that instinct is precisely what hands power away. A pause is not empty. It is loaded. It forces attention. It creates tension. It shifts the weight of the moment off your shoulders and onto the person who attacked you. This is why silence functions as a weapon, not because it is passive, but because it denies the other person the reaction they need to dominate the frame. The technique itself is almost boring in its simplicity. When the comment comes, you do nothing. You do not smile to seem agreeable. You do not frown to show pain. You do not look down or away. You look straight at them with a neutral, almost unreadable expression. And you count slowly to 3 in your head. 1, 2, 3. That is it. No words, no gestures. In those 3 seconds, something subtle but powerful happens. The room waits. People expect a response, a defense, a joke, anything. When it does not arrive, their attention drifts back to the person who spoke. The pressure reverses. The silence stretches. And now it belongs to them, not you. Imagine a coworker making a sarcastic remark during a meeting, testing you in front of others. Instead of explaining yourself, you pause, meet their eyes, and say nothing. The conversation stalls. Someone shifts in their chair. Another person looks down at the table. The attacker feels the gap opening beneath them, because their comment has nowhere to land. Silence is not weakness. It is pressure. You did not avoid the insult. You handed it back. This works because silence removes your emotional signature from the exchange. Without visible reaction, there is nothing to feed on. The other person may laugh nervously, add words, or try to clarify. That is not confidence. That is discomfort. By staying still, you force them to carry the moment alone. Over time, people learn something important about you. You are not easy to provoke. You do not perform on command. And once that lesson lands, the attempts quietly stop. It changes how you see yourself too, because you realize you can stay present without collapsing. The fear fades when you stop feeding it. Silence teaches your nervous system that you are safe even when watched. Each time you hold it, you train control. Eventually, what once felt unbearable becomes effortless, and people sense that shift immediately. They stop pushing, stop joking, stop testing, because silence signals boundaries without explanation. And boundaries that require no explanation are the hardest to cross. This is how quiet presence rewrites your position permanently today. When someone attacks you with shame, your instinct is to defend the facts, your reputation, your intentions. But defense is the trap that keeps you stuck, because it shifts the entire interaction onto their terms, forces you to argue inside a frame they created, and quietly signals that you need approval. The moment you start explaining what you meant or why you acted that way, the spotlight moves off their behavior and locks onto your credibility, which is exactly where shame wants you. Small, reactive, and busy proving something that never needed proof in the first place to begin with. Ever. Psychological inversion works because it refuses that invitation entirely and instead redirects attention from what was said to why it was said at all, shifting the weight of the moment back onto the attacker without raising your voice or sharpening your tone in any visible way whatsoever publicly today now. When you stop debating accuracy and start observing behavior, the power dynamic flips. Because you are no longer the subject under examination. You are the one holding the lens, calm, curious, and emotionally unreachable in the middle of pressure and noise around you. Both suddenly present there together again now. Imagine someone snaps at you, you messed up, expecting an apology or a rushed justification, and instead you pause, keep your voice flat, look at them, and ask, "Are you okay?" Which quietly reframes the exchange as their emotional problem, not your professional failure or personal flaw in any way. In that instant, the room feels it, because the question lands sideways, soft on the surface but heavy underneath, forcing them to account for their tone, their impulse, and their loss of control while you remain grounded, composed, and strangely untouchable by the accusation they tried to pin on you. Another option is even colder. That was a strange thing to say, delivered without sarcasm, without heat, simply naming the behavior and letting it sit in the open, where everyone can feel how awkward and unnecessary it sounded, once stripped of its emotional charge and audience support, entirely gone now. The calm one writes the story, because composure gives you narrative authority, and whoever explains is already losing. Trapped in a defensive loop that signals insecurity even when the facts are solid, reasonable, and correct. Since status is not built on truth alone, but on how you carry pressure publicly. What makes this approach devastating is that it removes emotion from the exchange without escalating conflict, leaving the attacker exposed with nowhere to go but forward into their own imbalance or backward into silence. Both outcomes quietly lowering their position while yours stays intact, steady, and self-contained in full view. Over time, people sense this shift and stop testing you. Not because you are intimidating, but because you are unreadable. And unreadable people cannot be easily controlled, shamed, or scripted. Which is the real goal here, not winning arguments, but ending the emotional leverage others once held over you completely. There is a moment when shame becomes especially dangerous. Not when the attack is false, but when it is true. Because truth gives the shamer confidence and leaves you with fewer places to hide. Maybe you were late. Maybe you did make a mistake. Maybe your personality is sharp, loud, or difficult. In those moments, most people collapse inward, hoping humility will soften the blow, or they fight outward, arguing details to escape the label. Both reactions keep shame alive. The agree and amplify method ends the game entirely by removing the one thing shame needs to survive: resistance. When someone says, "You're arrogant," and you respond calmly, "Yeah, it helps," you are not confessing weakness. You are denying them leverage. You are signaling that the trait they tried to weaponize does not wound you, does not embarrass you, and does not lower your sense of self. Shame only works when you want to be seen as something else. The second you stop running from the label, it loses its power. This technique feels counterintuitive because we are taught to protect our image, to polish our edges, to appear acceptable. But power does not come from appearing flawless. It comes from appearing unashamed. When you agree without defensiveness and amplify without apology, you take control of the meaning. You show that you are already aware of your flaws, already at peace with them, and therefore immune to public exposure. Picture a situation where someone says, "You don't know what you're doing," expecting you to shrink or explain. Instead, you smile lightly and say, "Sometimes, and I still get results." The room shifts. What sounded like an insult now sounds like a hollow attempt at dominance. The attacker has nothing left to push against. Confidence eats insults for breakfast because confidence does not argue with reality. It owns it. This works because shame is not about accuracy. It is about reaction. A flaw that embarrasses you can be used against you forever. A flaw you openly acknowledge becomes boring. People lose interest in attacking what does not bleed. If you are not ashamed, no one can shame you. Over time, this approach rewires how others treat you. They learn that pointing out your imperfections does not buy them control or attention. It only reveals their intention. And slowly, the comments stop. Not because you became nicer or quieter, but because you became unmovable. Agree and amplify is not sarcasm, and it is not self-deprecation. It is ownership. It says, "I see myself clearly, and I am still standing." Once you reach that state, truth can no longer be used as a weapon against you, because you have already claimed it on your own terms. To win against shame, you have to understand a truth most people miss. The attacker is rarely focused on you alone. They are performing for an audience. Shame is not a private exchange. It is a social act, a small theater designed to signal dominance and recruit agreement from the room. The laugh, the smirk, the timing, all of it is meant to pull others onto their side and push you down the ladder without saying it directly. That is why arguing with the attacker is usually pointless. You are fighting the actor instead of addressing the crowd that gives the act its power. Once you see this, your strategy changes completely. You stop trying to shut them up and start repositioning yourself in the group. One of the most effective ways to do this is something subtle, almost invisible, called triangulation. Instead of locking eyes with the person who just took a shot at you, you briefly look at a third person nearby. Not dramatically, not exaggerated. Just a quick glance and a very slight smirk. The kind that says, "Did you catch that?" without saying a word. In that moment, you create an unspoken bond with the audience. You are no longer the isolated target. You are sharing perspective. Imagine you are at a party and someone makes a sarcastic remark at your expense, loud enough for others to hear. Instead of reacting or defending yourself, you pause, then glance at someone else in the group and give a barely there expression, calm, amused, controlled. The energy shifts. The crowd instinctively reads the signal. The attacker suddenly looks like they are trying too hard, reaching for attention, forcing a laugh that doesn't quite land. Power is social gravity. People move toward whoever feels stable, relaxed, and unbothered. And the one trying hardest is the weakest, because effort exposes need. By triangulating, you quietly move yourself to the center of gravity and push the attacker to the edge. This works because humans are deeply sensitive to group cues. We follow confidence without thinking about it. When you remain composed and subtly aligned with the crowd, you tell everyone watching that you are not threatened, not impressed, and not impressed by the performance. Over time, this changes how people perceive interactions around you. Attacks fall flat. Jokes lose their edge. The room stops rewarding the behavior, and the attacker feels it immediately, because without audience approval, their words lose meaning. This is not about humiliating them. It is about withdrawing the spotlight. When you stop feeding the performance and redirect attention elsewhere, shame collapses under its own weight. You don't win by being louder. You win by controlling where the energy goes. Once you understand that, you are no longer reacting inside someone else's script. You are shaping the social field itself, calmly, quietly, and in full view. There is a certain type of person these earlier methods will never fully stop. The toxic attention seeker who feeds on reactions the way fire feeds on oxygen. For them, conflict is not a mistake. It is nourishment. They don't care if you argue, stay calm, or even outsmart them. As long as they get a response, they feel alive. This is where the nuclear option comes in. And it is not clever, dramatic, or satisfying in the way people expect. It is deletion. When someone like this speaks, you do not acknowledge them at all. You do not answer. You do not pause. You do not change your expression. You simply continue what you were already doing, as if a random sound passed through the room and meant nothing. If you are talking to someone else, you keep talking. If you are working, you keep working. If you are standing, you turn slightly and reorient your body away from them. This is not avoidance. It is erasure. Imagine a person making a cutting remark, waiting for your reaction, and you respond by calmly continuing a different conversation, asking another person a question, or checking something on your phone without urgency. The message is brutal and unmistakable. You do not exist to me. This is important to understand, because many people confuse this with the silent treatment. The silent treatment is emotional. It says, "You hurt me, so I am withholding myself." Active non-existence says something far colder. It says, "You are not relevant enough for my nervous system to register." Nothing hurts the ego like irrelevance. Attention is the highest currency, and you are refusing to spend even a cent. For an attention seeker, this triggers panic. They escalate. They speak louder. They repeat themselves. They push harder. And the more they push while you remain unmoved, the more unstable they appear to everyone watching. You don't have to expose them. They expose themselves. This technique works because it starves the behavior at its source. Without reaction, without acknowledgement, without friction, there is no reward. Over time, they learn that targeting you leads to emptiness, not stimulation. This is not cruelty. It is boundary enforcement at the highest level. You are not teaching them a lesson. You are simply choosing where your energy goes. And once people realize they cannot buy your attention with disrespect, they stop bidding. The room recalibrates. Your presence feels heavier, quieter, and more self-contained. You are no longer part of the chaos. You are outside of it. And from that position, the power is absolute, because you are not fighting for dominance. You are removing yourself from the game entirely. There are moments when silence is not enough. When the pressure continues, the disrespect repeats, and you need to cut cleanly to end it. This is not about venting anger or proving intelligence. This is verbal surgery, fast, controlled, precise. The goal is not to win the room with flair, but to stop the behavior instantly and permanently. The first surgical strike is simple and devastating. Who are you trying to impress? You don't raise your voice. You don't smile. You ask it like a factual question. In a meeting, at a dinner, in front of others. This sentence exposes the performance underneath the attack. It breaks the illusion that the comment was spontaneous or harmless. Suddenly, the spotlight shifts. People stop hearing the insult and start seeing the insecurity behind it. The second strike is even colder. Say that again. You lean in slightly, calm, attentive, as if you genuinely didn't hear. Most insults rely on timing and surprise. When forced to repeat them, they lose rhythm and courage. The attacker hesitates. The words sound uglier the second time. Often they retreat with a weak, "Never mind," and the power exchange is over. The third strike is quiet but humiliating in a different way. "You don't have to take it out on me." Said with neutral concern, it reframes the attack as emotional leakage. You are no longer equals in conflict. You are the stable one witnessing someone else's loss of control. Each of these lines works because they are short. Short sentences signal power. Long explanations signal need. Precision beats aggression because aggression escalates chaos, while precision ends it. Picture a colleague snapping, "You clearly don't get this." You look at them and ask, "Who are you trying to impress?" The room freezes. Or imagine someone making a sharp joke at your expense. You pause and say that again. The laugh dies instantly. Or someone unloads frustration on you and you respond, "You don't have to take it out on me," calmly, without accusation. In each case, you didn't attack their character. You named the behavior and cut away its fuel. These lines are not insults. They are mirrors. And mirrors terrify people who rely on dominance games because they expose without emotion. Use them sparingly. A surgeon does not swing wildly. One clean incision is enough. When delivered correctly, these sentences don't invite debate. They end the exchange. And once people learn that crossing you leads to swift, quiet consequences, most stop crossing you at all. All of these techniques work, but they are only tools. And tools are meant to be used less as you grow stronger, not more. The real endgame is not becoming skilled at deflecting shame. It is becoming someone who no longer generates shame as a reaction inside. Shame survives in one place only, the parts of you that you have not fully accepted. As long as there is something you are hiding from yourself, other people can sense it, press on it, and use it. This is why the final phase is not external. It is internal. It is the construction of an inner fortress. You stop outsourcing your self-worth to the room, the crowd, the comment, or the opinion of someone who does not carry your life. Think about the areas people most often feel exposed. Money, your past, your loneliness. If someone hints that you are not where you should be financially, it hurts only if you secretly agree and feel ashamed of where you stand. If someone mocks your past mistakes, it stings only if you are still trying to erase them instead of owning them. If someone jokes about you being alone, it cuts only if you see loneliness as proof of failure instead of a season of growth. This is shadow work, not in a mystical sense, but in a practical one. You sit with the things you avoid. You name them without flinching. You say, yes, this is where I am right now, and I am still worthy of respect. The moment you stop hiding, they run out of ammunition. People can only shame what you pretend is not there. When you bring your flaws into the light on your own terms, they lose their shock value. This is the paradox most people never reach. Vulnerability to yourself creates invulnerability to others. You don't need to announce your weaknesses publicly. You don't need to confess or overshare. You simply need to be at peace with them internally. That peace changes your posture, your tone, your timing. Others feel it immediately. Their words bounce off because there is nothing soft underneath. Over time, you notice something strange. You use fewer techniques. You pause less deliberately. You defend less intentionally. Not because you forgot the methods, but because situations stop arising. People test those who look uncertain. They challenge those who seem to need approval. When that need disappears, so does the provocation. This is when respect becomes automatic. Not admiration, not affection, respect. When you stop asking to be liked, you start being respected. You walk into rooms differently. You listen more than you speak. You choose where to place your attention. And attention, as you've learned, is the highest currency. At this stage, shame no longer feels like a threat. It feels like information, a signal about the other person, not a verdict about you. You are no longer prey reacting to movement in the grass. You are the trap, still, grounded, and aware. People sense the difference even if they can't explain it. And that is the final transformation. Not louder, not harsher, just unmovable.